Good evening, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Here we are again for the fifth week in a row, fifth and final week of our Building an Authentic Practice webinar series. It looks like Jay is joining us from Egypt, so we had to go out with a bang. So we had to reel him in from vacation to be here. But I'm Dr. Jennifer Stewart. I hope that this is your fifth time joining us for this amazing series. I've been so thrilled with the guests that I've been able to have on here. And I actually was just saying, I went back and re-listened to most of the webinars so far, just to hear all the pearls, because I don't get to hear them in the moment. So I've really enjoyed myself going back and listening. So if you haven't caught all of the episodes, if this is the first one that you're joining us for, if you've missed one, they're all recorded, so you're able to go back and listen as often as you'd like. And I hope that you will share your experience with your colleagues and friends, and I'd love to hear what you thought about the series as well. So I'm excited to introduce Jay Binkowitz for our fifth session. Jay is the CEO and president of GPN and the EVP of Strategy and Field Operations for Total Eye Care Partners. He's a friend of mine for a very, very long time. I think almost the whole time I've been in the industry. So I'm really excited to have Jay on here tonight to talk about how to wrap up our discussion on, we've set the plan in place. So now how do we know if our plan is working? So this is our final series called Measure, Evolve, Progress, and Succeed. Jay, thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh my God, it's my pleasure, my pleasure. Coming to you live from the pyramids.
Yeah.
But I think the series has been wonderful. I've listened to all of the recordings. I think you've done a fantastic job. I think everybody did a great job of contributing. So, kudos to everybody.
So, well, Jay binged them all, right? It was like a Netflix series that you just said, I have to listen, and I did them all. And so I wanted to tie this up with you as our last presenter for the series. We've gone through the past 4 weeks. We've kind of figured out what we want from our practice. We started by looking at a big picture of what we want our practice to do. How does it support our professional, personal, and financial goals? How do we put efficiencies and processes into place now that we know what we want? Then how do we build that team? How do we find the right people to help us with our dreams and our goals? How do we create a culture that supports that? And now, finally, we're going to talk about, once we've got that plan in place, what can we do to make sure that we're continuing to monitor that? So it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. It's not we go in, we do this all, and we just hope for the best and hope that our best laid plans work. But I'd love to talk to you, because I know that you're like me and you love metrics and you love tracking and managing. And I know that you've done that throughout your career. So I'm excited to hear what you have to share.
Absolutely. And by the way, I would be remiss in saying that your selection for the person to discuss culture could not have been better. David Freefield is always fun to talk with.
We had a good time. That was a quick half hour. I think we could have done probably 2 hours there. So that was a lot of fun. And the feedback has been wonderful in that. So I think, once you do create that culture, you can see how it really impacts the people around you. And I know we had a lot of the Clear Vision team who joined us to listen, which is amazing that they took the time out of their schedule to do that.
Oh, absolutely. And David gave them all bonuses. It's okay. You asked some such really, really good questions that relate to strategy and monitoring and what to look for. And, and the whole thing can be so overwhelming for folks. Back in the day before Dr. Stadlin and Evan Kessler and myself, founded GPN, we were doing things manually on spreadsheets and, or just hoping the day would work out good, or just count how much money went into the bank and hope there was money left in the checkbook at the end of the month. And, I remember one of the first things I did when I joined Dr. Stadlin's practice was to level out the cash flow. Most folks have terrible cash flow issues, and it's because they're not in cycle with when they have to pay their bills. So, they put in these big orders, and and then when the orders are due, they don't have the money for it that month. They maybe had the money for it the previous month or the next month, but not necessarily when it's due. Or back in the day, not everybody used payroll services, so people were still paying their own payroll taxes quarterly, which meant once per quarter they were broke. They didn't take pay that week because they had to pay payroll taxes. So all of a sudden, there's always a spiking cash flow system, and that is inherent in so many businesses, and it doesn't have to be when you look at the things that affect cash flow. But that being said, when you talk about metrics, some of the things that you and I have talked about is what's my fave 5 or what's my fave 10 to really look at. I know you laugh, but some of my favorite things to do are manual. And I still do them. I've never given them up. And I still think, they really complement all the technologies and resources we have today. I think you need both. One of my favorite things to do manually is spot checking 20 jobs. And I walk into an office and I just pull down 20 trays, 10 from the lab, 10 from the pickup area, and I'll literally just sit there and cost them out. I'll see what frames were sold with what lenses. I see which plans are there. I'm costing out what my net results are based on what I expect to receive from the plans, what I got from the patients. And in that moment, I'm actually understanding what the net profitability of that particular tray is. I'm going to tell you, that was the biggest learning outcome for me before we started consulting. And as we got into consulting, we taught everybody on how to do that. It was the most significant tool to monitor cost of goods, to make sure we were selling the right products with the right plans, understanding who needed education and training. I mean, it was just that 30 minutes, which is all it really took us, was invaluable. So one of the most prevalent things I've ever done was manually spot check jobs.
I think that's great because a lot of us assume that our staff are doing everything correctly and that they're making the right decisions, and we're just hoping that they were taught once and that they're doing it right. But I think it helps everybody, keeps everybody on their toes to make sure that we do know what's going on in the moment, and also checking multiple people, making sure that everyone's doing it consistently. I'm sure you've uncovered some real gems there.
Unbelievable things that always were mind blowing to me. Like, I thought we did this already. I thought we figured this out already, but hey, it's 3 people ago.
Yeah.
And so it's not that person's fault because it was 3 people ago. So that's something that never stops on a weekly basis. My team always knew when I walked into the office, the first thing I did is walk to the lab, and they knew that was my routine. And that's what told me what happened for the week, from that perspective. But the other thing I found extremely important is something that we coined the phrase, the Monday morning number. GPN was famous for using this phrase. And it was teaching folks that when you put your key in the door Monday morning, you're writing a check. So you have a lot of bills to pay that week, right? So you put your key in the door, you're writing a check. And at some point in that week, you have to know, when are you going to cover that check? So, how much business do you have to do? What profit margins does it take to cover the check? And my standard rule of thumb was, we want to do enough business by Wednesday so that would cover my expenses for the week. And Thursday and Friday was profit for me. So that was kind of like our little rule of thumb. Try and get enough business by Wednesday to cover your expenses. And then I knew Thursday and Friday were happy days for me. And on a small scale, that worked. But more fun is that on a large scale, we found that it worked. The more practices that we taught the Monday morning number to, the better they got at watching their expenses and understanding their profit. So that became a key thing, which isn't chair time. It was literally, what's it going to cost you to run your practice this week?
And looking at that and understanding that so that you can make those decisions and not just hoping you get to Friday and that there's enough money to cover the payroll tax.
Oh my God. Fate. I've always said, the worst person to leave on your team is called fate.
Now, for the doctors who feel they don't have time to do that, what's your best advice for somebody who says, Jay, I can't, I don't have the time?
Well, first of all, I've never met anybody that has the time. So let's start there. But yeah, I ask some questions, because most of us are too busy to make money. And part of that is, are you happy with how much money you're making, or happy with how much time you're spending with your family? Is your staff coming to you and saying, hey, I make too much money, I'd like you to take some back? You give me too much PTO, I'd rather take less time off.
That's a culture.
I don't really care about spending time with my newborn baby. if those aren't reasons to make time, I don't know what is. Quality of life decision support is highly necessary. But those folks who say that they don't have the time, it's not as hard as they think. It's a discipline. None of us took time management courses. Some of us, just naturally got good at it. Some of us pretend to be good at it. Some of us are natural multitaskers, which means it looks like we get a lot of stuff done, but we don't really get a lot of stuff done. At the end of the day, best lesson I ever taught folks was pick a day, any day of the week. Pick 2 hours of any day of the week. It could be from 1 to 3. It doesn't matter. And just let your team know that during this period of time, this 2-hour period of time, they're not allowed to use your name. You're not there. You're not allowed to use your name. It doesn't matter what's happening, who's screaming. You're just not there. Yeah. And if you don't protect that time and respect that time yourself, if you keep, all right, I'll do this. All right, I'll do that. You keep diluting, then you will never have the time. But if you make that 2 hours, I'm not even telling you to make a half a day or a day. I'm just saying 2 hours. If you can't make that 2 hours where you could just sit and focus on your business, maybe you shouldn't be in business.
And we've heard that throughout that's been a kind of a theme throughout the 4 weeks, is really kind of identifying what kind of business you want to run and putting the time in place to make that happen, and really carving that time out and saying, I'm not here. Just let me be. And this is the time that I can use to look at the metrics that I should be measuring in my Monday meeting, and figuring out my numbers that I need to hit. So hopefully that's one of the big things that I'm hoping that people take away from this series, is that it's okay to give yourself permission to not see patients and to take that time away from the business to plan and think and create and dream and monitor and measure, because those 2 hours are so valuable. But most of us feel really strapped for time and really overwhelmed with everything. But those 2 hours can be so valuable. If you can say by Wednesday, I've paid all of my bills and I've paid everything for the practice because I've invested that 2 hours up front, that money that you can generate on Thursday and Friday can really be so much that you can put back into the practice, or take your vacation, or as Nathan said, take your 2 weeks off and spend the first week decompressing and the second week really on vacation. But yeah, I really think it's important to hear that it's okay to take those 2 hours.
It's good. I've always found that and going on vacation, people don't want to take time off because that means the practice isn't going to produce. So they get really nervous that they're going to have expenses without revenue. So they take as little time off. They may grab a long weekend or do a family function, but they certainly don't take the family vacations they should be taking. And yet, by taking those vacations, you clear out your brain, have an extra couple of margaritas, drink a bourbon, come back refreshed. And really, it's mind-boggling how much more productive you are, and how much easier it is to navigate through some of the obstacles we do on a day-to-day basis. That time off is critical. People should really need to think about that in a different way.
So in those metrics, what other metrics do you recommend tracking? What are your favorites that would be ones that can really help us, not only necessarily with the nitty gritty of the practice, but in our big picture of making sure that the things that we're thinking about and putting in place are working? What metrics would you recommend that we track?
Some of the things have to do, what my fave is true net revenue broken down by clinic and optical. Those are critical numbers. It's not just the total revenue, it's net revenue per exam, which really lets me know, because you could say, hey, Jay, I did $100,000 more this year, so I'm doing okay, but you can't tell me if it's the clinic or the optical. You may have been up $200,000 in the clinic and down $100,000 in the optical. Your net result is being up $100,000 for the year, so you think you did better when you don't even know you actually did worse. And when you look at net revenue per exam as a number, it's such a critical number, because if, for instance, you are seeing more patients, let's say you see 1,000 more patients, and your net revenue per exam by seeing 1,000 more patients, goes down $10. So all of a sudden, that's $10,000 less dollars. And I'm using small numbers right now because you saw 1,000 more patients, when really, instead of going down, it should have gone up, which means that you probably didn't adjust your labor properly. You didn't adjust your scheduling process, something that you could have just tweaked. You would have, instead of going down 10, would have been up 10. And so you really left $20,000 on the table. So, that's why it's so important to look at the true net number broken down by exam. But then when you talk about conversion rates, very few people do conversion rates on additional testing. And, I've never figured out why. What percent, when I say to folks, what percentage of your patients are doing additional testing, and what additional testing are they paying for? How are you tracking that? Most people don't track it. I don't understand. We want to track complete pairs of eyeglasses and transitions and NAR and second pairs and all this other fun stuff, but we don't apply that to the clinic. And yet it should be applied to the clinic. And then, of course, you have, billed versus collected. I still call people and they tell me what their billings are. And I'm like, okay, can you pay your bills with your billings? The answer is no. You pay your bills with your collection. So what percentage are you at? What's your norm? Are you at 60%, 62%, 64%? Are you tracking on a weekly, monthly basis how much you're collecting against your billing? And is that number stable? Because if that percentage, if that KPI is not stable and your billing percentage is doing this all the time, then your cash flow is doing this all the time, which means you can't pay your bills. So that's another key. There is one phrase that we came up with many years ago, GPN, that we kind of got in trouble for, so we decided to keep it. We coined the phrase $0 frames.
Oh, yeah.
And $0 frames relate to what number of frames, what percentage of frames are patients getting that they pay zero for. Because obviously you're not making a lot of money if the patient's not spending any money. And of course, that leads to board management strategies that say, okay, well, I need frames with higher discounts because they're not going to spend any money out of their pocket. I got to make the money on the discount on the back end. But $0 frames is an important thing. We found that the average patient, when we walked into practice, that wasn't spending any money on frames, after having a reasonable conversation and offering them, and not sales, we never believed in strong sales, but offering them products that they could spend $29 or $39 on out of pocket, that the average patient that says, I don't want to spend any money, that patient will still spend $29 or $39. And so it's understanding that you have to adjust some of the products you're going to bring to the table so that give them an opportunity to spend the $29. Or if you took in 1,000 more patients and don't have enough staff, you're going to say, okay, you want that? Fine. Next patient, because you don't have enough time to spend with them. And that leads to the $0 frames.
So it gives you the information, make objective, not emotional, subjective decisions that we tend to all make, and it might be that a staff member says, we need this or we need that. And you go, okay, it's fine. Like, I'll make that decision. And you're spending more money on things that you might not need if you can just change the flow of your office and
that goes to strategic planning, right? So that's identifying that. That's 100% right. Change the flow, change and adjust and they're tweaks.
Yeah,
they're just tweaks.
But you won't identify that if you don't set this time aside to find out what's going on. And
when I started out with Dr. Stadlin, I was on the floor doing everything. So I really learning from the ground up. So I got to see a lot of that from myself. And as we brought people on, that's what we would teach. But as we grew and then GPN grew, obviously Jay can't be everywhere and Dr. Stadlin can't see every patient. That's the price of growth. In our consulting business, we had to figure out how to scale that. But so these are the things that we would teach people to watch.
Do you find that most people over or underestimate their metrics? Do you think
they overestimate? They generally will tell me the last 2 sales they made.
That's the ones.
Yeah, the last 2 best sales they made. People also say, but what's your average sale? Oh, it's about $400 or $500. I said, really, when's the last time you sold a $400 or $500 pair of eyeglasses? And then they have to think about it.
But why do you feel that practices fail to act on these metrics if they identify them? What do you see with people failing to take those steps?
Well, that's a great question. Time is there's no question time is involved with that. There's a dashboard GPN uses that it's an opportunities dashboard. And I always fell in love with that because the logic of it said, stop trying to do too much. So if you could pick 4 initiatives for the whole year, just 4, right? Maybe there's a bunch of metrics you want to impact. Maybe there's 10 or 12 you want to impact. Let's put those aside. let you and your team agree on 4 and do it with your team, make sure everybody's in on it. And if you just do one, you have them concentrate on one KPI per quarter. And if you just impact slightly 4 different KPIs at the end of the year, it's worth $50, $60, $80, $100,000 to your practice just by doing 4 of them. So you don't need to do 10, 12. Don't get overwhelmed. There's a plethora of numbers and information available today that never was available before. But, that's analysis paralysis, which is what scares people. My answer is simplify it. Sit down with your team, identify those 4 items that all of you can commit to for the year, that no matter what happens, these 4 items you're going to make right. And just go after 4 items. Less is more. And you'll be successful. There's no question about it.
I think that's great advice as we're a month from the end of the year. So this is a great time to reflect and think about the 4 things that we might want to measure and monitor for 2023. So whenever I lecture live, I always joke I give homework. So that's the homework for everyone watching now and everyone who watch on YouTube. That's your homework. Pick 4 KPIs and assign a quarter to each. And that way you don't feel overwhelmed. And I know when I speak to doctors about metrics, they tell me, I'm not a numbers person, or I don't have the time. I find it overwhelming. And and I'm somebody who loves looking at that, but still can get overwhelmed as well. Cause you're like, well, oh no, the frames, my frames aren't where I want them. And our daily disposable percentage, and oh wait, my clinic revenue, and I have to talk to this one about their AR percentage and our second pair sales. And it does become overwhelming. And then your staff, I feel like they get overwhelmed and then they get numb to it. Cause then they go, oh, here she comes again. Like, I'll just smile and nod and she'll go on her way. Yeah, we'll work on that. But if you give them 1 per quarter and have regular meetings about it, and then continue to work on that first metric in the second quarter as well, don't give up on it. But it becomes second nature. I would assume that you're doing this, and that first metric then becomes easier, and then it helps kind of continue that throughout the year.
Right. And so in order to build sustainability in our initiatives, you absolutely want to build confidence in your team, which is what you're saying right now. And that is the key. You have to set them up for success, and they will set you up for success. So if you give them instead of asking people to hit grand slams, which is what we do, we're going to do AR, and everybody pumps their AR and they're doing 90%, 95%. And then, a month later, it falls off a cliff. And you're back down to 40, 50%. It's about slow growth, slow and steady growth. If you say each month, I just want to increase 5%. So if you're at 30% and you want to get to 45%, you don't say we're going from 30 to 45. You say we're going from 30 to 35. You make it very attainable. And so you're creating the behaviors that are necessary for it to become sustainable. And at that point, you'll give them base hits, and they will achieve base hits all day long, and they'll feel really good about it. And then what happens is they get thirsty. They're like, okay, we're there. We got it. We're set. Give us more. They'll actually pull from you. Instead of you driving from them, they're going to start pulling. Give us more. We could do better. We could do better. It's amazing what happens. And all you have to do is just start with those 4. They'll grow on their own.
Or start with 4 for now. And then if you have 12, that's your 3-year plan. And we talked earlier about setting long range plans and really not just saying we're just going to, kind of do everything now. But this is an opportunity now to create a long range business plan for years and years. And it becomes fun to look long term instead of feeling like I'm overwhelmed in the moment, so I have to make all these quick decisions. So I think that helps with that fear. Would you say helping that fear of making adjustments, that helps with these smaller steps?
And it absolutely helps. And it also helps you understand who needs help.
Yeah.
Right. So not everybody on the team is in the same place at the same time. You'll see who the laggers are, and you say, okay, let's get this person a little bit more help. Did they need more time? Did they need more training? What do they need to be successful? And the team can rally around them. So, but like I said, if you take those baby steps and set baby goals, not big goals, you're going to set your team up for success, and you're going to create the behavior changes that you're looking for, so it stays in place. And you can't be the type of leader that says, okay, I know I said this last week, but we're going to do this week. All right, we're going to take a break for that for a week. we need to do this right now. And then we'll go back to that. If that's the type of leader you're on, boy, did you just shoot everybody in the foot. You have to be disciplined is really what that comes down to.
What I love is looking at the metrics for your team separately, because I think you're right. It does create the idea that you're not just looking at an overall number and everyone's contributing equally, but you can really delve into what each person needs and develop that team member accordingly. So it goes back to making sure we have the right people on the team in the right places, and then the culture, making sure they feel supported. So if you do see an optician lagging behind, because now you can look at their metrics specifically, you can address that, and everyone rises, and you can. Everyone rises, and you're not working as hard because you're not just going out to the group going, do better, do better, do better. You're just pulling people aside and saying, I noticed that this might be a little of a challenge for you. Let's set you up for success. And you bring that person up and you can see those metrics. So it really helps everyone, I think, just understand, and it's objective. Again, it's not a feeling, it's not an emotion. We're taking the emotion out of the decisions we're making, and we're making real decisions based on numbers, and numbers don't lie.
100% right. You're really, like I said, you're setting your team up for success that way, but not encroaching upon them in such a way that they're going to be worrying about it or get anxiety from it. You're showing them you want them to be successful. You want to help them be successful. But one of the ways to do that also, my doctors never loved this. But there are two things I always said. They never loved this, although I'm going to challenge you to do it.
Oh boy.
Is whatever training that your team is sitting through, you should be sitting through with them. Yeah. I don't care if it's ABO or paraoptometric certification or basic training from a contact lens, whatever the training is, you should be right there with them. You shouldn't say, okay, take 3 of my staff members and next week come back, take 3 more. And you don't even know what they learned. Right. So you can't support them because you weren't involved in that training. The other thing I love to do is tell people, take your phones and record yourself. Record yourself, having fun. So you play the patient or they play the patient, and you have a conversation about a product or a services, and you record yourself so you could hear yourself talking. Because there's no better way to learn than to hear yourself talking. And you're doing it in a safe environment. So if you're sitting down with your friends and you're just playing around and you're saying you're pretending to the patient, you can be comfortable. You can have fun with your friends, but you start to use the words and the explanations. You start to help each other learn what to say and how to say it. But you have to do it through a recording. People hate to do it. I'm not telling you to post your recordings, delete them all you want. But those are 2 things I always say are very important to learning.
Well, Jay, as we wrap up, I look down and it is almost time. It goes very quickly. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
I'm going to share with you. I did just get back from vacation. I was at the pyramids behind me, and listen. They could build the pyramids. We could run a practice. That being said, I did one of the books I love to read, and I share this with everybody. It's from Blake McCoskey, who started the shoe company Tom's. I don't know if I'm showing it right here. Can it be seen? I don't know. Anyhow, the name of the book is Start Something That Matters. And there it is, Start Something That Matters. I tell you, this is an extraordinary book for business owners. It's entrepreneurial in nature, discusses other businesses as well. And I encourage people to read the book. And I leave everybody with this: communication. We are horrible communicators. And the true essence of success always comes from great communication and great listening. Always ask your team, what can you do to make their lives easier? What obstacles are in their path? And listen to them. Don't just keep throwing stuff their way, and let them be comfortable coming to you and having those same conversations, and have the same conversation with your patients. What can you do to make the experience better for them? If you're not asking those questions, if you're not sitting down and having those conversations, you're not learning about your business. So you're not succeeding. And so communication and listening are powerful tools.
Thank you. Well, this was very powerful. We got to listen to you. And it was wonderful as always to have you. I love anytime I get to spend time with you, and I learn a lot. I was writing down the name of that book. I am going to add that to my book list as soon as we're done here. I love reading anything about business, so that's one I haven't read. So thank you personally for the recommendation.
Absolutely.
Where can we find you? If we're looking, where can we find Jay Binkowitz?
Wow. I'll be in a country somewhere. So my email folks can contact me at is jay@askjb.com. ASKJAY, the letter B.com, jay@askjb.com. I do reside in Charleston, South Carolina. You can hear that in my voice. That's pretty obvious that I'm a Southern guy. And be my pleasure to answer any questions or follow up with anybody that needs.
Well, thank you, Jay. This was a perfect ending to an unbelievable 5 weeks. I really can't thank you and all of the previous guests enough. This has been an unbelievable learning experience, the things that I've learned personally, and the way that we've taken the conversation from really taking a step back and identifying, why did we start a business and why are we here? We spend most of our time in our businesses, so why did we do this? What are we looking to achieve, and going all the way through to now, how do we continue setting ourselves up for success by monitoring that and making sure we're making the right choices. I can't thank you enough. And thank you to everyone who's here tonight, who's joined us the last few weeks on Tuesday nights, and who's even taken the time to view these after the fact. Thank you from me and the whole GPN team and the iThrive community. I look forward to continuing to be part of the iThrive community through all of the blog posts. Keep reading all the blog posts, and I look forward to seeing you all soon at a meeting, hopefully in person. So thank you again. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night, Jen. You did a fantastic job, Jen.
Thank you.